Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm over at Live Park and I'm here for one specific thing. Well, a few photos, but one specific goal in mind, because recently I have been receiving more and more messages about how I do stacking. So bugger off, I'm going to do an entire video just about that, because I think this location is pretty good to cover each step I do one by one. What I mean by stacking is not just stacking in Photoshop with layers of different photos. It's not that simple. Well, that's the first step. The second one would be exposure stacking combined with the first one, and then exposure blending, which is manual. You can't really do it auto in a way, and you have to rely on your own experience. So it's going to be a bit more complicated, but I hope to explain all of this, and in the last photo, at least I hope so, to see if I can combine all four techniques, well, three, if you had to include it before, in one single photo and see how that goes. I mean, today's going to be a bit of a suffer video because I already have two massive mosquito bites on my hand and I've only been here for, what, 15 minutes? Yeah, it's hot, there's a lot of bugs here, and I think today is going to be a lot of fun. Anyways, without further ado, let's move on to the first photo. After a relatively quick setup, here we have the first shot of day. Let me just say this first, I'm going to cover the basics of stacking first, including the gear you need and the basic techniques. So it's going to be a little bit boring for you who already know what the basics are, because I think I've touched on that slightly in an old video. Let's take a look at what the gear you need first. First of all is a tripod, one singular tripod just for the camera, because everything needs to be stable. And I don't think you can just shove the camera on, say, a blanket or your backpack, because it would surely move. Because with high resolution cameras, and I'm not just talking about my camera, about a lot of different cameras, things move. 1 or 2 millimeters is enough to ruin your entire shot. So having a stable tripod is very, very important. The other thing would be lights, because when you're stacking, you would need the best lighting you can get, because you're on a tripod, you'll be stable. Why not have some lights? I recommend at least one off-camera flash because, well, as you can see, if I were to put my flash on top of the camera, it would just not look very good, would it? So I have my flashes set up like this, one slightly higher than the door, one slightly lower than the door, hopefully achieving around balanced lighting. One more light on top of the camera, hopefully that works out well. This is just for the eyes because the reflection doesn't really work too well if I'm just using the flashes, at least in this backlit situation. Now, to go over some basics of stacking. What I am going to do is I'm going to take a photo like this, and then I'm going to remove the doll completely from the picture, and I'm going to take another photo. Sounds simple, right? Unfortunately, things usually don't turn out that good, because as soon as I move the doll away from this chair, as you can see right here, the chair actually moves. It moves by around a millimeter or so upwards and a millimeter or so to the left. Your right, my left. And when I move it, the stacking shot doesn't work, right? Well, no, because as soon as I know what's going to happen in the next photo, aka the stacking one, I can just eyeball it and move it in post, which makes it better, salvageable. I don't know what's the term for it, but that's how I work with things. In a lot of these situations, things don't move, and I'm lucky for that. However, in these situations when you're putting a doll that's relatively lighter, it's not a DD, it's MDD, which is small already, thank God. It still moves, so you have to know what's happening when you're shooting the photo. You can't just be oblivious to that. Sounds simple, it's actually quite simple as long as you're used to it. Let's take a look at what I'm using actually. 24mm f2.8 because the doll is in a very, what's the word? tight situation, everything in the background needs to be blurred as much as possible, and f2.8 is still kind of cutting it, because as you can see on the doll's left side, there are these, what do you call them, markings that are very, very clear, and also aside from that, on the up is going to be a lot of flaring. At least it's not direct sunlight, at least it's just shining into the frame, so I'm not particularly concerned. As I covered, two flashes, they're at quite low output actually, because this scene, no matter how much you look at it, it's quite backlit. Everything in the background is completely blown out, so I think it's a good opportunity that I'll be covering, what do you call that, exposure stacking and exposure blending a little bit later in the video. Anyways, without further ado, let's take a look at the first shot for today. I would say it looks pretty good because it's just a repeat of what I did last year and last year, because it's a good spot. I found this spot accidentally, I think 2 years ago, and it's stuck in my mind, and I come here every year and just repeat the same shot. However, this time it's horizontal, so at least that's different. Anyways, I think there's one more shot right out there for me to cover exposure blending, so let's move. Alright, this is a relatively simple setup. However, there are some unique problems to this one that I deliberately chose to demonstrate my point about exposure stacking. I don't know if it's the right word, you can call it HDR, but I call it exposure stacking. So, with this one, it's actually quite bright in the front. So it's direct sunlight shining right on the doll, right on me, right on this white wall thing. And in the back, it's just so dark. It's all shadows, it's all muddy and murky, aside from a few reflections here and there. So how do you solve this problem? You want to see the front, you want to see the middle, you want to see the back. What can you do? Exposure stacking. So what I'm going to do is determine what the optimal exposure of the doll is. In this case, it's 1/500th of a second. Everything in front is white, it's going to reflect more light, so I'm going to shoot this and focus on this one with 1,000th of a second, because that's -1 on the exposure scale. And for the back, I'm going to put it around 1/250th of a second, because that's half the exposure, that means +1. So, with this in mind, I can have the back at least with more detail, the front with more detail on this part, and the doll still in optimal focus, optimal exposure. Then I'm going to use these three photos and stack them together in Lightroom in HDR. That's what I do. You can do it in Photoshop, you can do it in Affinity, or whatever way you do it. That's how I do it, and combined with what I did just now. So, taking the doll away, shooting this exact three things again, and exposure blending that together, and putting it in a layer, and clearing out the stand. That's usually how it works. However, in this case, you have to understand, with exposure compensation, with exposure blending like this, it has a risk of making the whole photo a bit dull, because Lightroom doesn't really like it when you put three photos together and having shadows, having highlights, and in one photo making it a bit more flat for you to edit. That means you have to ramp up your color grading skills by around 20 or 30%. I ramp it about 50 because I want the pop colors, especially when everything's very, very flat in exposure blending. Now, let's go over what I'm using. 7200 f2.8 at around 100mm, actually a little bit more than 100, I'd say around 110 or so, at f5.0, because everything in the background is blurred out anyway, plus I want some things to be visible, because what's the point of exposure blending if you can't see anything in the background? Now, the flash duration is actually quite simple. One flash right here, the other one I'll say hold around in there or so. So I'll be standing in there, put this on the timer, and go in there, reflecting light on the face, because everything out here is very, very bright. It's actually reflecting the light onto the doll, making it quite soft and actually quite nice. And the little trick up my sleeve is actually this umbrella. Because of the direct sunlight, it's actually passing through the light and giving a very soft, bright exposure towards the face and to the eyes. And the rest can be accomplished by these flashes. And I've actually moved the camera slightly in front so I can talk like this to you. If not, the camera would be back there and you would barely see me when I explain all this exposure bullshit. Anyways, hopefully that wasn't very technical, and let's take a look at the second shot for today. I would say it actually looks quite good, at least on the back of the camera. I don't know how it's going to look after editing. I mean, if it looks good on the back of the camera, I'm pretty sure it's going to look okay. Maybe it's because everything's very complicated in the middle and everything is very simple out there, and simplicity kind of does the trick. I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to have to wipe off my sweat because I've been standing in this bright sunlight for God knows how long. And the next spot is actually over all the way there. So I will have to pack up everything and move my ass over there. In the meantime, let's get some B-roll done and let's roll. Alright, here we have the third shot for today, and well, this took me a little bit more time to set up because of the pose, the limitations, and the whole sunlight thing kind of meddling with the shadows and the highlights. So I think this is a perfect example of how I do manual exposure blending, on top of the two things I covered in the video. So allow me to explain how this works. As you can see, the sun, the shadows hitting on the structure, on this outfit, the gold bits reflecting look really, really nice. However, this means that the face will also be subject to that harsh sunlight. While some people don't mind it, I don't really like that. And you see me holding this here. You've probably seen me use this in the Melbourne videos, maybe in Japan as well, quite often. And this is a mini, tiny little reflector that you can peel off the surface and become a little diffuser, used for diffusing sunlight just like this, and is way smaller than the one I had before, which was 60 centimeters. This is 30, much better and way easier to carry because you can just do this. So how do you use this thing? Well, the way I do it is I cover up the face, the portion of this, and then take one photo and take that away and just do it as usual. So I'll take the photo like this and then take over the doll, do the stacking portion, and see if I need to do any exposure blending, so HDR. In this case, I don't think so because the highlights look quite good in this scene. However, you may ask, then what's the point of using this thing? Because it's going to cover the face, which means that it's going to cover everything else as well, right? Well, here's where the stacking stuff comes in, because when I'm stacking the photo in Affinity, in Photoshop, whatever, I only scrub out just the face portion of the original photo. Well, original photo, the uncovered photo, and let only the covered version, so this one, get into the frame or the finished product, which means that only the face will be under soft light while everything else is still really harsh and looks the same in the entire environment. Because if you were to just cover up the whole doll and say crop out the whole thing and paste it onto a version which is uncovered, I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about, it will look really, really weird. What I'm saying is only the face will be soft light in the final product. The moment I tell you the secret, the moment you know how this works, you will see that I actually do this in a lot of photos. Somehow in really harsh light, in really, really brutal conditions, the face is still beautifully soft. This is a secret to it. Of course, there's going to be a few things different here and there, but that's about the rule of it. Anyways, let's take a look at what I'm using. 7200 f2.8 at around 135mm at 5.6 because I want to see what's in the background, and it wouldn't really make sense if nothing's in the background, right? What's the point of coming out anyway? With one flash on top of the camera just like this, because, well, I can't exactly hold this in place while I also hold a flash right here. I wish I can, but my arms are not that long. vertical composition. Horizontal didn't work that well, and I want vertical to focus more on the doll and tell you what I'm actually doing. Everything looks okay, and I think I should get the shot going before the sun goes down too much and I lose all this beautiful sunlight. Anyway, let's take a look at the third shot for today. I would say it looks about alright. It's not exactly anything that special. It's just a tutorial photo on how to do exposure blending but manually. It's quite a hard skill to do because you will need to eyeball a lot of these things when you're editing, and you also have to understand how this works before you even take the goddamn photo, meaning that you would have to plan everything in order for this to work. This is a relatively advanced technique, and I don't expect anyone to master this within one day, but it is what it is. Anyway, I think there's one last photo right over there, so let's get moving. Alright, the last photo for today, and unfortunately I don't think I will need to use all the things I talked about in today's video about stacking, because the situation doesn't really call for all these things. I will be doing, as always, the normal version of stacking, which is taking a photo of the dolls, taking them away, and then shooting another photo, and then doing the rest in Photoshop. That's just a basic version of everything. However, I don't think I'll be needing to do any exposure blending, and I don't think I'll be needing to do any exposure, HDR, the second one, because it's not really necessary, and I don't want to put even more effort into a photo that I don't think is actually all that good. Let's take a look at what I'm using. 7200 f2.8 and 135mm f5.6, because everything is kind of blurry at this kind of focal length, plus I want both the faces in focus. If I were to use around f4, it would actually ruin the photo because one is going to be behind the other and it's not exactly that great. I want both of them in focus as a new phone wallpaper. Speaking of that, vertical composition. Horizontal is not that good and it's kind of losing a bit of focus because I want just two of them in the frame and then a little bit of the sides, but that's about it. I don't want the walls. The last photo I got here kind of had a walls there and it was okay, but it was a bit distracting and I didn't really like that photo that much. It's still one of the best photos I took though, don't get me wrong. Now the flashes. One is actually below the horizon in a way, right to here, and it's alright. However, thankfully the doll's faces are looking downwards, so the eyes actually reflect light downwards, meaning that it's alright. However, in any other situation, the flash actually needs to be at least at this level, as you can see right here. It's not exactly below horizon, so everything is alright, and they have to be at quite low output because it's all shadows in here. If I would tune everything up to very, very high output, yes, it would count the sun behind, but it would lose the meaning because I need that backlight, I need that sunlight right at the bare minimum. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but I need that outline as what I do with my flashes in dark situations, but the sun is actually doing me a favor. So let's take a look at the final shot for today. And we're done. I'll just pack up everything else and actually shoot the photo and actually do all these stacking bullshit if I ever need to. And let's roll the outro. I'm finally done with today's video, and let me just say this, hopefully you learned something interesting with today's video, because I know things can be a little bit technical with stacking, which is why I try to make it as entertaining as possible like today, and I know sometimes the explanation goes a little bit longer, which is why I also tier the things. So you go from stacking, so removing the doll, taking out the photo, and then go exposure blending, which is taking 3 photos of the doll, taking that away, and then taking 3 photos with no doll and taking that away. Sometimes it actually goes up to 5 photos, not just 3, but for the sake of it, I just made it 3 today. And then you go to manual exposure blending, which is just stacking, but fancier terms, and you rub things out in a different way. That sounded really, really wrong. But what I'm saying is you only rub out the things that you need and then you put it on the original photo, which makes it look softer and doesn't raise too much suspicion when people look at a photo and think that, oh, that looks a bit weird. I know some photos do look like that, but majority of how I shoot, I keep that in mind and try and not make it look as weird as possible. Hopefully you didn't click off with all of that technical jargon barging in with today, because I know recently the videos have been getting longer and longer, especially with the recent Japan videos that Oh boy, 28, 24, and 37 minutes, I remember. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And I know a lot of people clicked off in the middle of the video because they were just done with my... So I hope today's video is going to be shorter. So editing me, please, for the love of God, make it shorter, okay? Anyways, I know I like to yap about obscure things on and on, so I'm just going to cut this one short. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of this garbage. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the stacking, and let me know what you learned or didn't learn. And I will see you next time. Lemon out.